My husband told me casually, cruelly that he could do better than me. Something inside me shattered. He didn't know that the quiet woman he dismissed had a multi-million-dollar inheritance waiting, locked behind years of silence, grief, and legal restriction. As he spiraled deeper into his obsession with social status, luxury fantasies, and the illusion of a better life, he dug his own grave blind to the truth he would eventually choke on. What followed was a chain of betrayals, secrets, chance encounters, and emotional aftershocks that revealed who he truly was. And who I had to become. In the end, he learned that karma doesn't whisper, it roars, especially when fueled by the person he underestimated most. I still remember the exact sound of his voice when he said it. Not loud. Not angry. Not even dramatic. Just casual. Like he was commenting on the weather. Like destroying me meant nothing. We were standing in the kitchen, the one I practically designed and paid for piece by piece, while he scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging my existence. The Florida sun was spilling across the marble countertops, the only warmth in the room that morning. I had just asked him a simple question. Just one. Are we okay? I don't know why I asked. Maybe I sensed something. Maybe I felt the distance growing and hoped stupidly that he'd reach back for me. But instead he sighed, put his phone down, and said the 7 words that would change everything. Honestly, I think I could do better. For a moment, I didn't react. My brain simply refused to process it. Better? How? Better. Why? Better? Than me? He leaned back against the counter as if waiting for applause for his honesty. I mean, he added with a shrug, don't get emotional, I'm just saying, I've grown. And I feel like you haven't kept up. I felt something sharp twist inside my chest. Then he said the part that finally made the blood drain from my face. You're holding me back from the life I want. The life I deserve. The luxury I deserve. That was the moment my marriage cracked. And he didn't even notice. But here's the part he really didn't know, the part that makes this whole story unrecognizable from the outside. While he accused me of holding him back, he had absolutely no idea that I was days away from inheriting millions. Money had kept secret. Money I never expected to need. Money that would eventually destroy his fantasy. But in that moment, I just stood there, staring at the man I thought I knew. And he kept talking. He walked past me, grabbing his keys, straightening his shirt like it was a costume for the life he wanted. You should focus on improving yourself, he said. Maybe then I'd actually feel proud to be with you. Proud. As if I was a burden. As if loving me required endurance. He pulled out his phone again, still smiling at a notification that chimed. I recognized the sound. Instagram DM. A new message. From someone. He didn't hide the smirk this time. And my stomach folded in on itself. I sat alone on the edge of the bed, replaying his words over and over until they didn't even sound human anymore. They were knives, small and sharp, and they kept cutting, even hours later. I should have cried. I should have screamed. I should have walked out. But he didn't. Because in the middle of all that emotional chaos, my phone buzzed. A message from a lawyer. Not mine, my late mother's. Your required probate waiting period is officially over. Call me when you're ready to finalize the transfer. My heart stopped. The inheritance. The one I spent 2 years grieving for because it was tied to her death. The one I never wanted to touch until I healed. $12.4 million. And he had no idea. But here's the thing. The moment I read that message, a thought crept into my mind, dark, but strangely comforting. What if his cruelty was the biggest blessing I ever received? What if losing his respect meant gaining back myself? What if this was the moment everything changed? I didn't know yet. I couldn't know. But 3 hours later, I found the first piece of evidence that my husband wasn't just arrogant. He was cheating. And he wanted to replace me. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I just picked up his jacket from the floor to hang it, and his phone slid out of the inside pocket, lighting up as it hit the carpet. One notification. A name I didn't recognize. Had fun last night, same time tomorrow. My vision blurred. My hands went cold. I picked up the phone slowly, as if it were something dangerous, and read the thread. She was young. She was flashy. She was everything he said he deserved. And he had been seeing her for weeks. Suddenly, his comment made sense. The distance. The constant scrolling. The new cologne. The gym. The late nights. The attitude. He didn't think he could do better. He already believed he had. But the part that hit the hardest wasn't the cheating. It was that he didn't even feel guilty. In one of the texts, he wrote, "She's too plain, too boring. I need someone who elevates me. Someone who elevates him." As if love was a ladder. And I was holding him on the wrong rung. I put the phone down carefully. Very carefully. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not revenge. Not even heartbreak. Something colder. Something steadier. A seed. A tiny spark. The beginning of a plan. I went for a drive that night, windows down, Florida air still thick and warm, palm trees passing like ghosts in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just thought about the years I invested. About the love I gave. About the words he used like weapons. About the inheritance I never mentioned. About the woman in his phone. About the fantasy life he believed he deserved. And then I thought about something that surprised even me. What would happen when his plain, boring wife became a multi-millionaire overnight? What would he do? What would he say? Who would he run to? And why? Was I suddenly curious? When I finally walked back into the house that night, he was already asleep on the couch. The screen lit up as I passed. Another message from her. Another red heart. I looked at him, and something in my voice finally whispered inside me. He has no idea what's coming. And he didn't. Because by morning, I would make the first move. The move that would unravel everything. The next morning, the house felt different. Not quieter. Not colder. Just different. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I woke up before sunrise, my mind already sharp, clearer than it had been in months. I moved quietly, deliberately, almost like I was preparing for a performance I didn't know I'd been rehearsing for. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, hair messy, eyes swollen from a night of overthinking, and I realized something shocking. I didn't look broken. I looked awake. And that terrified me a little. He came into the kitchen around 7 a.m. smelling like the same cologne I'd seen in her texts. He didn't look at me. He never did in the mornings anymore. He just grabbed his protein shake, scrolled through his phone, and muttered, "Got a long day ahead." No greeting. No warmth. Not even a glance. I watched him from across the table, quiet. Internal storm building, wondering how a man could be so oblivious to the destruction he created. But then something strange happened. His phone buzzed. He smirked. And he angled the screen away from me. As if I didn't already know. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug. I didn't say a single word. Not yet. Words were too small for what I had planned. After he left, I went straight to the one place he never expected me to go. My mother's old safe. The one that hadn't been opened in years. The one filled with everything he believed I didn't have. Proof of who I really was. Proof of where I came from. Proof of the life waiting for me on the other side of his betrayal. Documents. Legal letters. Financial transfers. My mother's handwritten notes still sealed. And on top of it all, the folder the lawyer told me to prepare. I laid everything out on the table, from birth certificates to tax records, my entire identity spread like a blueprint of the future. And I realized the truth. He had been underestimating the wrong woman. Around noon, I finally called the attorney. He answered on the first ring. "Are you ready?" he asked. His tone was gentle, patient, almost like he already knew my silence wasn't grief this time. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready." As he walked me through the remaining steps, something inside me steadied. This wasn't just money. This wasn't just inheritance. This was freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of power rising in my chest. But there was a problem. A complication. Something the lawyer said that sent a quiet chill down my spine. "Your spouse will need to sign a standard disclosure acknowledging he's not entitled to any portion of the estate." Just a formality. A formality? If only he knew. My cheating, arrogant, status-obsessed husband. Signing away millions he didn't know existed? I almost laughed. Almost. But he didn't. Because I knew exactly how he'd react. He would refuse. He would question. He would demand. And when he learned the truth, he would panic. And panic makes people reveal who they truly are. I hung up the phone and sat quietly, staring at the sea through our back window. The tide was rolling in, soft and rhythmic, completely oblivious to my unraveling marriage. I wondered, should I tell him today? Should I wait? Should I hold the power until the moment he'd feel it the most? Then, as if the universe wanted to answer for me, my phone buzzed again. A text. From an unknown number. He told me he's leaving you soon, you deserve the truth. Attached was a photo of them together. Last night. My hands went numb. My husband, kissing her, holding her face, smiling at her in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. That was the moment something snapped. Not my heart, not my faith, not even my patience. Something deeper, something colder. The version of myself who tolerated him died. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened a new bank account. In my name only. I transferred a small portion of my soon-to-come inheritance into a secure holding fund, just enough to test the system. Just enough to create a digital ripple. A breadcrumb. A whisper of wealth. Something he might notice. If he was snooping. And I wanted him to notice. Because the first rule of revenge isn't anger. It's curiosity. Let the guilty wonder. Let them sweat. Let them dig their own grave. I took a screenshot of the new account balance. I didn't send it to him. Not yet. Instead, I changed the wallpaper on my laptop so that the screenshot appeared on the lock screen, where he could see it. Accidentally. Or so he'd think. Then, I waited. When he finally came home that evening, he walked in with a confidence that made my skin crawl. He smelled like her perfume, light, floral, intentionally subtle. He tossed his keys on the counter and said, "You look different." I smiled. Soft. Controlled. Almost kind. "Do I?" I asked. He studied me for a moment longer than usual, like he sensed something shifting beneath the surface. But before he could say anything else, he noticed my laptop. The lock screen lit up. My new account. The numbers. The sudden wealth. His eyes widened. "Wait. What's that? What account is that?" The first strike landed. And it landed beautifully. He stared at the numbers, stunned. Trying to hide his interest behind a thin layer of fake casualness. "That's, new," he said. "You didn't tell me you were opening anything." He swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and the screen. "Where did that money come from?" I didn't answer. He didn't blink. I didn't give him anything. I just whispered, "We should talk." And his face changed. Because for the first time, he realized something. I wasn't the woman he thought he could replace. He stood there like a man trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces, eyes flicking to the laptop, then back at me, then back at the numbers he had no business seeing. "Where did that money come from?" he asked again, voice tight. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He wasn't worried. He wasn't concerned. He wasn't even curious in a loving way. He was calculating. And that told me everything. I walked past him, making sure my expression gave nothing away. Not anger. Not hurt. Just calm. "We'll talk in a minute," I said. "Let me put something away first." His eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering like a spark. "Put what away?" I paused at the hallway. "Evidence." His face went pale. He followed me down the hallway, slower than usual, like he wasn't sure if he wanted the truth or feared it. I opened the top drawer of my dresser and pulled out the envelope. Not the inheritance paperwork. Not yet. The other envelope. The one I found yesterday. The one from the unknown number. The one containing the photograph of him with her. I placed it on the bed without a word. "What's this?" he asked. "You tell me." He opened it. He froze. He swallowed. He blinked twice as if the picture might change if he stared long enough. Where did you get this?" "A woman sent it to me. Someone who thought I deserved the truth." He stared at the photo of himself kissing another woman, hands on her waist, her fingers tangled in his hair like he was looking at a stranger. "A liar. A cheat. A fraud." You said you could do better, I reminded him. Was this what you meant? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. They never do. He started pacing, running a hand through his hair, muttering half-formed excuses that dissolved before leaving his mouth. It's not what it looks like. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for you to find out. He never said he was sorry. Not once. That was the moment the heartbreak turned into something else. Something sharper. Something far more dangerous. Because if a man doesn't apologize when he's caught, he's not sorry. He's only sorry he lost control. You've been cheating for weeks, I said softly. Why lie? He snapped his head toward me. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. That's what a lie is. He opened his mouth to argue, but then he saw the expression on my face. Not broken. Not devastated. Focused. And he finally realized. I wasn't just confronting him. I was planning something. What are you trying to do? He asked, stepping closer. There was fear in his voice now. Real fear. Good. You've been acting strange since last night. He continued. You're hiding something. That account. The money. What's going on? You'll know soon. He grabbed my arm. Not hard. But firmly. Tell me. Now. I looked down at his hand. Then back into his eyes. You should remove your hand before I remove it for you. He swallowed, releasing me. And that's when his defensiveness cracked enough to reveal the truth behind it. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing something else. Control. He stepped back, running his tongue along his teeth, a nervous habit he tried to hide. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. There's no reason for this to get messy. We can fix things. We can talk about the money. We can talk about everything. Now he wanted to talk about the money. I didn't say the money was mine, I said. But since you're so interested, why? His throat bobbed. Because we're married. And anything that affects you, affects us. Us. Funny word coming from a man who spent last night in someone else's bed. You said yesterday you could do better than me, I reminded him. Shouldn't you be happy I have money now? His jaw clenched. That was different. How? I didn't know you had this. And you think you deserve it? He didn't answer. He didn't deny it either. I took a breath. A long, steadying breath. Why her? I asked. The question hung heavily in the air. He flinched. She's exciting. Ouch. She makes me feel like the man I'm supposed to be. Another stab. She believes in my potential. And I don't? He hesitated. Too long. Not in the way I need. There it was. The betrayal beneath the betrayal. Not just the cheating. Not just the lies. Not just the arrogance. He didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience. Someone to praise him. Someone to feed his ego. Someone to stroke his fantasy life. Someone. Less intelligent. Less grounded. Less capable. Someone easier to impress. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a mirror. A mirror that made him feel bigger. So, I said slowly, you've been replacing me. He swallowed. Don't say it like that. How should I say it? It's not like I was planning to leave. Pause. Not immediately. Not immediately. As if that was mercy. As if staying with me temporarily was some kind of kindness. I felt something wash over me in that moment, not pain, not rage, but utter clarity. He didn't just betray me. He diminished me. He reshaped me into someone small in his mind because it made him feel large. That was his real betrayal. He took a step toward me, desperate now. We can fix this, he said. We can go to therapy. We can rebuild. Just tell me about the money. I need to know what's going on. He didn't care about rebuilding. He cared about the account balance. I walked to the dresser, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the stack of legal documents. His eyes widened, fear, curiosity, greed, all tangled into one expression. What are those? He asked. I held them at my side. These, I said softly, are the beginning of the truth. His breathing shifted. What truth? He stepped forward, close enough for him to feel the change in me. The truth, I answered. That will end everything you think you know. He stared at the documents in my hands like they were explosives, silent, tightly sealed, and seconds away from tearing his entire fantasy apart. What truth? He asked again. More desperate this time. I didn't answer immediately. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Before revealing anything, I needed to see him. Really see him. The man behind the arrogance. The man behind the cheating. The man behind the delusion of deserving better. I sat on the edge of the bed. He stood across from me, tense and unmoving. And all at once, the emotions I'd been holding back surged upward, fierce and raw. Why wasn't I enough for you? He flinched. His mouth pressed into a thin line. I didn't say you weren't enough. He muttered defensively. You're twisting my words. No, I said quietly. I'm just finally hearing them. He crossed his arms, classic deflection stance, trying to look in control, but his foot tapped involuntarily against the carpet. A nervous tell. You've changed, he said, voice uncertain. I woke up, I replied. His eyes dropped for a second, and I saw a flicker, just a flicker of guilt or regret or something close to human. But only for a second. Because then he said, you're overreacting. People go through rough patches all the time. What matters is staying together. My jaw tightened. Is that what you told her? I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That was different. How? He hesitated. Then, she makes me feel alive. I nodded, slowly. Because that truth settled deeper than the affair itself. Alive, I repeated softly. He didn't even hear the crack in my voice. Then he said something I will never forget. You've gotten too focused on your own stuff. Work, routines, responsibilities. Everything is so serious with you now. There's no spark. A spark. He wanted fireworks. While I was building foundations. He wanted a show, while I was building a life. I was grieving, I whispered. For my mother. He froze. Only then did he realize he said something monstrous. But he didn't apologize. Not him. Instead he said, I know, but grief can't be your whole personality. I felt the room tilt. I felt something inside me crack open. That's what you think of me? I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because the silence said everything. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You know, I said quietly, I used to believe marriage meant partnership. Support. Loyalty. Staying even when things get hard. He looked away. But you left the moment things stopped entertaining you. He shook his head. That's not fair. Oh, it's perfectly fair, I said, not loud, but firm. Because you didn't cheat because you were unhappy. You cheated because you were bored. His nostrils flared. He hated being called out. You think you know everything, he snapped. No, I replied softly. But I know you. He took a step toward me. Just tell me what's going on. Tell me about the money. Tell me what those papers are. Stop dragging this out. Dragging this out? This was his consequence. This was his truth unfolding. This was the emotional fallout of everything he thought he could hide. Before answering him, I walked to the window. The Florida sunlight cut across the floor, warm but merciless. I want you to understand something, I said. When you told me you could do better yesterday, something broke inside me. He swallowed. You didn't just belittle me, you dismissed me, erased everything I did for you, everything I gave. Silence. You made me feel small, I continued. Like I was holding you back. Like I was dead weight. He flinched. I didn't, men. Yes, you did. And that's what hurts. Not the cheating. Not the lying. Not even the betrayal. He frowned. Then what does? I turned to him slowly. You stopped seeing me. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. And after everything I've endured for you. After every sacrifice. After every moment I stood by your side. You looked at me yesterday and told me you deserved better. That was the day I stopped trying to save us. His face changed. Fear began creeping in. Real fear. He pointed at the documents. So what are those? He asked, voice nearly a whisper. I looked at them. then looked at him. I'm going to tell you, I said. But you won't like it. He breathed hard through his nose. Try me. I handed him the top document. He scanned it. Confusion twisted his eyebrows. What is this? He asked. Legal transfer authorization. I replied. For real estate assets. Plural. He blinked. Real estate. Yes. Whose? I stepped closer. Mine. And? What is this number? Is that the valuation? Yes. He swallowed. Twice. You bought property? He asked. No. Then where did this come from? I held his gaze. My mother. His face went blank. She left me everything, I said softly. Investments. Properties. Accounts. Trusts. All of it. He just stood there. Unable to speak. He stuttered. You never told me. You never asked. His eyes darted across the pages, numbers, portfolios, appraisals, millions. Real. Undeniable. Protected. Why hide this from me? He whispered. I stared directly into him. Because I never wanted our marriage to be about money. He closed his eyes, jaw tightening, hands trembling around the papers. It was the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him in years. He looked at me, stunned, shaken, breath unsteady. How much is all of this worth? He asked. He didn't look away. $12.4 million. He inhaled sharply like someone had punched the air from his lungs. The room fell silent. Then he whispered, barely audible. And it's all yours? I nodded once. Slow. Measured. Unapologetics. His face drained of color. His posture shifted. His greed awakened. And then he whispered the question that confirmed everything I already knew. So, how do we access it? I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the voice in my head whispering that something was off, but because of the silence. A home that had once felt warm, lived in, and familiar now felt staged. Like I was walking through a stranger's house wearing my own skin. By sunrise, I was pacing the balcony, watching the Florida sky shift from lavender to gold. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been missing something big, something right under my nose. And then, as if the universe was tired of me being slow, the first secret revealed itself. Daniel had left in a hurry the night before. He almost never forgot anything in his car. But that morning, one small detail stood out. His Tesla was still in the driveway. Keys still inside. Door unlocked. It was so unlike him that it might as well have been a flashing red sign. I opened the door. The first thing I noticed was the smell. A sharp mix of cologne that wasn't his and a fruity perfume I didn't own. My stomach tightened. But what truly froze me was the envelope in the glove box. It had my name on it. In handwriting that definitely wasn't Daniel's. I slid the envelope out with trembling fingers. Inside were receipts, printed emails, and a neatly folded sheet. Receipts from luxury stores I'd never visited. A $9.2 charge at a jewelry boutique in Brickell. A resort booking in Key Largo. A dinner reservation for two. Each one timestamped at hours Daniel had claimed to be working late. But the sheet was worse. Someone had compiled everything into a timeline. A precise list tracking his lies. His locations. His purchases. Written at the top, in swirling handwriting. You deserve to know. I nearly dropped the paper. Who? Who was doing this? Who knew all of this? And why were they sending it to me? For a second, I looked around the quiet street. Half expecting someone to step out from behind a fence or a palm tree. Nobody. Just the Florida sun rising like nothing was wrong. I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My heart hammered as I stared at the receipts again. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one sentence. If he finds out what you know, he'll destroy you before you're ready. I felt me blood turn cold. What did that even mean? Before I could respond, another message appeared. There's more. Check the center console. My hand shook as I reached over and opened it. Inside was a USB drive. Black. Unmarked. Menacing in its simplicity. Suddenly, this wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just emotional neglect. Something darker was forming at the edges. Something calculated. Someone wanted me to see everything. I didn't want to plug it into my laptop. My gut screamed that whatever was on it was going to crack my world in half. But I had to know. I went back inside, shut the blinds, and inserted the USB. For a moment. Nothing. Then a folder appeared. Daniel Truth. Inside were 6 video files. My pulse tripled. I clicked the first one. The screen flickered. And there he was. Daniel. Laughing at a rooftop bar. His hand on a woman's lower back. Her body pressed into his like they were sharing oxygen. But it wasn't the flirting that made my heart stop. It was what he said. Through the grainy audio, I heard his voice clearly. She's too simple to ever leave me. She thinks I'm her whole world. She has no idea who I really am or what's coming. I covered my mouth, trying to breathe. But the next part shattered something in me. Once the deal goes through, I'm done with her. She's dead weight. Dead weight. That was how the man I loved, the man I built a life with, described me. I felt something inside me shift. A stillness I'd never known. Like a storm deciding where to break. I played the next video. This time Daniel wasn't at a bar. He was in an office I didn't recognize. Sleek glass walls, high-end decor. He was talking to a man in a navy suit. She doesn't know about the accounts, Daniel said. And she won't. We move the money next month, and then we cut ties. The man nodded. Make sure she signs the transfer papers first. Daniel smirked. Oh, she will, she trusts me too much. I leaned back in my chair, numb. Accounts? Money transfers? Tut these? This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a setup. A financial ambush. One he'd been planning for months, maybe longer, and suddenly, the message from the unknown number made perfect sense. He'll destroy you before you're ready. I opened the final video file, and instantly froze. Because in this one, Daniel wasn't talking to a stranger. He was talking to someone I knew. Someone close. Someone I trusted. Someone who should never, ever, have been in that room. I gasped. My hand flew to my chest. And that's when I realized. This betrayal wasn't just his. It was theirs. But the worst part? The video ended mid-sentence. And someone had cut the footage. Which meant, the person who recorded it had only shown me what they wanted me to see. So now the question tearing through me was no longer, is Daniel betraying me? It was. Why is someone else pulling the strings behind all of this? And what do they want from me? I didn't move for almost a full minute. My body didn't even feel like it belonged to me anymore. The last frame from that final video was still frozen on my laptop screen. The face of the person standing beside Daniel. Someone who should never have been anywhere near a scheme like this. Someone who had slept under my roof. Shared my food. Hugged me. Smiled at me. I felt my chest tighten until it physically hurt. But then, in that sea of panic, something else flickered to life inside me. Not fear. Not sadness. Something sharper. More deliberate. Stratege. If they thought I was naive, if they thought calling me dead weight made it true, then they didn't know me at all. Not yet. I replayed the video 3 times. Every detail, every gesture, every angle. And somewhere between the second and third rewatch, I noticed something tiny, but important. Behind Daniel and that traitor, on the glass wall, was a reflection. A building across the street. A logo. Barely visible, but there. A circle with 3 diagonal slashes. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in. The image blurred, sharpened, blurred again. But I knew that logo. I'd seen it on brochures before. On banners at networking events. Trimar Holdings. A private finance and asset acquisition firm based in Miami. A place Daniel had no legitimate business with. Which meant, whatever plan he had in motion, it wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was financial warfare. And I was the target. But here's the part that gave me my first spark of hope. Trimar Holdings had been under quiet investigation for months. I remembered reading about it. A small headline buried in local business news. Something about shady acquisitions and questionable transfers. If Daniel was tying himself to them and planning to drag me into it, then he was playing with fire he didn't even understand. And maybe, just maybe, I could turn that fire back on him. I picked up the USB again, weighing it in my hand. Something didn't feel right about how perfectly everything had been delivered. How neatly packaged the evidence was. How conveniently timed the anonymous texts were. Whoever was feeding me this information wasn't doing it out of kindness. They wanted something. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at my phone. Then it buzzed. Same unknown number. You weren't supposed to see the last video yet. My breath hitched. Before I could respond, another message followed. But now that you have, everything accelerates. A third message. Meet me tonight. Midnight. Bayside Marina. Pier Dues. I stared at the screen, my pulse thundering. Meet them? Alone? At midnight? Every survival instinct screamed no. But if this person had more information, more evidence, more leverage, I needed it. Because now it wasn't just about what Daniel had done. It was about what he was preparing to do. Florida heat settled over the house like a damp blanket. Outside, the air buzzed with cicadas and distant traffic. Inside, my mind was a storm. I changed into something practical. Dark jeans, a fitted long sleeve, sneakers, clothes I could move in. Then, for the first time in years, I opened the small lockbox in the closet. Inside was the pepper spray I never used. A pocket knife. A burner phone I'd bought during hurricane season. Just in case. Funny how those just-in-case items always become essential the moment life falls apart. I packed them. But before I left, something told me to search Daniel's office one more time. Not for documents. Not for receipts. For answers. And that's when I found it. Tucked between two folders in the bottom drawer. A contract. Unfinished. Drafted by Daniel. Title at the top. Asset Reassignment Marital Allocation Proposal. I flipped through it, my throat tightening. It outlined a plan to transfer marital assets to a joint entity, one that Daniel would then dissolve. The end result? He would walk away with everything. I would walk away with nothing. The man who claimed to love me had been setting a legal trap beneath my feet. This wasn't betrayal. This was premeditated. I sat back, the contract dangling from my fingers. So many pieces were falling into place. But one piece still didn't fit. Why now? Why the sudden urgency? Why the luxury purchases? Why the resort booking? What was happening next month? That was so important he was willing to cut me loose? The anonymous texter knew. And tonight, I would know too. At 11:57 p.m., I stood at Bayside Marina, moonlight glinting on the water like broken glass. The smell of salt, gasoline, and humid midnight air clung to my skin. Pier 12 stretched ahead of me. Empty. Silent. Eerie. Then, a figure stepped out from behind a yacht. Slowly. Deliberately. I felt my entire body go still. Because as the person approached, their face lifting just enough for the moon to catch it, I instantly recognized them. And the name that tore out of my throat was not one I ever expected to say in this nightmare. You? For a moment, the world around me fell completely silent. The ocean breeze. The creaking ropes against the docks. Even the distant music from Bayside Marketplace faded into nothing. Because the person walking toward me, the person who had been sending secret messages, collecting evidence, tracking Daniel's every move, was my sister, Tessa. My own flesh and blood. Why? It was the only word that made it past the tightening in my throat. She stopped a few feet away. Hood partially shielding her face. But I could still see the same familiar stubbornness in her eyes. The same look she had when we were kids, and she insisted. She knew something I didn't. Except tonight, that look felt wrong. Cold. Calculated. Tessa slipped her hands into her pockets and exhaled. As if she'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. It was only a matter of time, she said quietly. You needed to find out. And Daniel wasn't going to tell you. I felt a tremor run through me. I understand showing me he cheated. But the financial setup? The contract? How did you even get those videos? Her expression didn't soften. Not even a little. Because, she said. I was in that room. The marina lights flickered in the water beside us. My stomach dropped. You were. What? Tessa gave a small, humorless laugh. Daniel didn't just betray you, sis. He dragged me into it too. The pieces began shifting, but they weren't forming a full picture yet. You're working with Trimar Holdings? My voice echoed across the empty pier. No, she said sharply. I was investigating them. I frowned. Tessa, you're a freelance consultant. Not an investigator. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I was hired months ago to dig into their asset acquisitions. Your husband was one of their newest recruits. The words hung in the humid night air, heavy and poisonous. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just planning a financial ambush. He was entering business with a company under investigation. A company that hired my sister to investigate them. And suddenly, the dots connected. You didn't just find those videos, I whispered. You recorded them. She didn't deny it. But why? I took a small step back. Fear and disbelief twisting together in my chest. Why keep this from me for so long? Why now? For the first time that night, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not remorse, but frustration. You weren't supposed to see the last video yet, she muttered. It complicates everything. I stared at her. Complicates what, Tessa? She hesitated. Tessa. My voice sharpened. Answer me. She looked away, jaw tight. I didn't want you to see who else was involved until I was ready to explain. My heart started pounding again. Ready to explain what? Finally, she met my eyes. I'm not just exposing Daniel, she said. I'm taking down everyone connected to this operation. I blinked. Operation? The word felt too big. Too ominous. Too dangerous. What do you mean everyone? Tessa took another step forward. And then I noticed something. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't scared. She was in control. I've been building a case, she said. A huge one. Daniel is just one piece. But to make it work, I needed you to stay predictable. I froze. Predictable? Tessa nodded. You're emotional. Loyal. Trusting. I knew you'd hang on until the truth hit you in the face. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was clinical. Like she was talking about a chess piece. Not her sister. My heart twisted painfully. You used me? No, she said simply. I positioned you. The words hit harder than any betrayal I'd seen so far. Tessa, what exactly are you trying to bring down? Daniel's business? Trimar Holdings? Her expression shifted just slightly. No, she said. I'm trying to bring down the people funding them. And Daniel gave them a doorway into your finances. A cold sweat slicked my palms. What doorway? She sighed. He used your name to open accounts. Accounts they could control. Accounts tied to federal violations. My knees nearly buckled. You're saying, I could be implicated. She looked at me with something like sympathy. Not if you follow everything I tell you from this moment on. I shook my head. No, this doesn't make sense. Tessa stepped close enough for me to smell her perfume. The same scent she'd worn for years. Listen to me, she said softly. Daniel doesn't just want to leave you. He wants to make you disappear off the financial map. So when this whole thing collapses, you're the one left taking the fall. My breath hitched painfully. And what about you? I whispered. You were in the room. You're on the footage. Why record it? Why expose him? Why send everything to me? Her eyes hardened. Because Daniel made a mistake, she said. A huge one. I swallowed. What mistake? Tessa leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that chilled my spine. He trusted the wrong sister. Before I could respond, a sudden splash echoed somewhere down the pier. We both turned. Footsteps. Fast. Deliberate. Approaching. Tessa's jaw tightened. They found us. She whispered. Ifet-mi pour shashpike. Who? I demanded. She grabbed my wrist hard. Run. Who's coming? I cried. Her answer hit like a bullet. Daniel. Tessa's hand clamped around my wrist so suddenly. I didn't even have time to react. 1 second, I was standing on Pier 12, my entire worldview cracking open in real time. And the next, she was pulling me into a sprint down the dark dock. The sound behind us grew louder. Fast, heavy footsteps pounding against wood. Someone was running. Someone familiar. Someone furious. Daniel. The man who once kissed my forehead every morning, was now stalking me through the shadows of a Florida marina. Like prey. Faster. Tessa hissed, tugging me forward. The humid night air thickened around us. Our footsteps slapped against the planks, echoes dissolving into the water. I choked out, "Why is he here?" "Because he knows," she snapped. "That you found the USB. That you've seen everything." My heart hammered. How would he know that this quickly? Because he's been monitoring his own accounts, his own footage, his own spyware. Spyware. I stumbled for half a second. "Wait. You're saying he's been watching me?" Tessa didn't look back. Watching both of us. My stomach dropped so violently. I thought I might collapse. But then a voice I recognized too well cut through the night behind us. Low, enraged, and unmistakable. "Hey, stop. Daniel." My blood iced over. Tessa yanked me toward a small boat tied to the dock. A nondescript fishing vessel with peeling white paint. She shoved me toward it. "In. We can't steal someone's boat." "It's mine," she snapped. "Now move." I scrambled in, nearly tripping as she jumped after me, and ripped the cover off the console. The engine sputtered to life. Daniel's footsteps grew closer. Louder. Then, the rage in his voice broke through the fog. "Both of you stop." Tessa shoved the throttle forward. The boat lurched. Water sprayed. The marina blurred. And Daniel's silhouette shrank behind us. As we sped into the open water. 5 minutes passed before Tessa spoke. 5 minutes of nothing but the roar of the engine. And my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. When she finally slowed the boat, I didn't even wait for her to turn. "What the hell was that?" My voice shook. "He looked like he wanted to kill us." "He might have," she said quietly. I stared at her. "No. No, Tessa, this is getting out of control." "It was already out of control," she snapped back. "You just didn't know it." I sank onto the bench, gripping the side rail. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. "Start talking," I whispered. "Everything, all of it." Tessa wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. For the first time that night, she looked exhausted. "Fine. You want the truth?" She pointed to my chest. "It all starts with your name." "My name?" "Yes." Her voice darkened. "Daniel has been using your identity to move funds, small transfers first, then larger ones. Accounts in the Caymans. Accounts tied to Trimar. And accounts linked to shell corporations that don't even exist." Cold sweat gathered at my scalp. I whispered, "Why use my name?" "Because you were clean," she said. "No red flags. No suspicious history. He needed someone with a perfect record." "I felt sick." "And what does Trimar want?" I asked. Tessa leaned against the console, her jaw tightening. "They launder money through asset transfers. Daniel signed on to be part of the relocation pipeline." I blinked. Relocation? Of what? She hesitated. "Money. Property. And sometimes people." Ice slid under my skin. "People?" She looked away. "You don't want to know." But the truth was, I did want to know. Because my husband had dragged me into this darkness. And my sister had been living in it for months. "Daniel wanted you to sign the marital reassignment contract," Tessa continued. "Because once the assets transferred, Trimar would pin the illegal origin on your accounts, not his." "And then what?" I whispered. "Then he walks away clean." She met my eyes. "And you become the fall guy." I stared at the water. Numb. Heartbroken. Angry. Devastated. "How long have you known?" The words trembled. 5 months, she admitted. I felt the betrayal slice through me. 5 months? Without telling me. "It wasn't safe," she said simply. "You weren't ready. You were still defending him." My chest tightened painfully. She wasn't wrong. But it still hurt like hell. I swallowed hard. "So what now?" Tessa pulled a waterproof bag from under the console. Inside was a laptop, folders, and a thick envelope. "This," she said, "is everything I've gathered. Every document. Every recording. Every connection. Enough to destroy Trimar. And Daniel with them." I stared at the bag. "And what exactly am I supposed to do with it?" "You," she said firmly, "are going to help me bring him down." I laughed. A bitter, shaky sound. "I can't even breathe right now." "Yes, you can. You just don't realize it yet." Her voice softened. "He underestimated you. They all did." My throat tightened. "And you?" I asked. "Did you underestimate me too?" Tessa's eyes flickered. "I didn't want to. But I needed you pushed to the breaking point before you would fight." "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you need that?" Her answer was soft, painful, and heavy. "Because taking down people like Trimar can't be done halfway. And Daniel? He won't hesitate. So you can't either." I stared at her. At the waves. At the distant lights of the shore. Something inside me snapped. Not in a way that broke. But in a way that awakened. Revenge wasn't just an idea now. It was a necessity. As I zipped the waterproof bag shut, a sudden vibration buzzed in my pocket. My phone. The screen lit up with a new message. From Daniel. One single sentence. "If you don't come home tonight, I'll release everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Tessa," I whispered. "He knows." She grabbed the wheel. "We're going back," she said. "Why?" Her eyes hardened with the coldest resolve I'd ever seen. "Because whatever he thinks he has, we can't let him use it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. A second message. A picture. Daniel, standing in our living room, holding something. Something that made my lungs collapse. A file. My file. The one he never should have had access to. And beneath the photo, a text. "Let's talk about your inheritance." The morning after the gala carried the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful. It felt støjet. Artificial. Almost. Expectant. I woke before dawn, long before my alarm, my body buzzing with an intuition I couldn't name. Something had shifted. Something had been set in motion. And deep down, I felt it pulsing beneath my skin like a distant earthquake. Daniel texted me only once that morning. "Board meeting at 10. Mandatory." No explanation. No context. Nothing else. Which was the first red flag. Daniel never held mandatory board meetings. He loved voluntaries so he could say he wasn't forcing anyone, even though he always was. I arrived early and walked through the glass doors of the company I had built with my own hands. The lobby looked the same, but felt different. Employees whispered more quietly. Eyes lingered longer. Some even gave me the kind of careful, hesitant smile people give someone standing near a ticking bomb. And I wondered, what did Daniel tell them? Or worse, what did he plan to show them? It was never closed. Never. Something cold slithered across my spine. I pushed it open. Inside, the room was packed not just with board members. Department heads. Advisors. Investors. Even a handful of lawyers. Daniel sat at the head of the table, hands clasped, eyes locked on me with a calmness so polished it was unnatural. Beside him, a projector remote. A sealed manila folder. A glass of water he clearly hadn't touched. He was waiting. And everyone else was waiting on him. I took my seat slowly. He let the silence stretch, coil, tighten. Until it wasn't silence anymore. It was a noose. Then he said it. Smoothly. Casually. As if discussing quarterly goals instead of detonating a grenade. "Before we start, I'd like to present something. Concerning my wife." Every muscle in my body went rigid. He clicked the remote. The screen behind him lit up. And suddenly, my worst suspicion didn't even come close to the truth. Walking into a hotel. At night. Alone. Then another. Leaving at 2 a.m. Still alone. Stilme. The date stamp? A week ago. The same week I'd been meeting with my attorney. A low murmur rippled across the table. Daniel leaned back. Voice calm, deliberate, rehearsed. I have reason to believe my wife has been engaging in activities that bring embarrassment and legal risk to this company. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it felt like bruises blooming from the inside out. Not because I was guilty, but because he knew exactly what he was implying. And more importantly, he knew the board would believe anything that fed their fear of scandal. He clicked again. More hotel photos. Different angles. Different nights. Then, a picture of a man entering the same hotel an hour after me. And another of him leaving an hour after I did. Except he failed to mention the man was my lawyer. A lawyer whose firm only met at off-site locations after a recent security breach. Daniel knew that. He knew all of it. Which meant, this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup. A beautifully crafted, dangerously subtle character assassination. Designed to crush me. Before I could finish what I'd started, my mouth went dry. My pulse hammered, but he didn't break. I lifted my chin, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, steady as steel, "You're framing me." A gasp came from someone at the table. Daniel gave a soft rehearsed chuckle. Why would I frame my own wife? I could have listed 1,000 reasons. Control. Pride. Fear. Power. Revenge. But the board didn't want motives. They wanted certainty. Confidence. A leader who seemed unshakable. And Daniel had performed the role flawlessly. He folded his hands. Looked at the room, not at me. Until we investigate further, I'm recommending temporary removal of my wife from all executive duties. A few board members shifted nervously. 3 nodded. 1 looked down. And for the first time since entering that room, I realized Daniel wasn't trying to humiliate me. He was trying to erase me. Erase me from the company. Erase my credibility. Erase my leverage. Because he knew. He knew I was preparing something. He could feel it. And this was his preemptive strike. His eyes met mine again. Cold. Calculated. Certain he had already won. But he didn't know something. Something that would change everything. Even as he dismantled me publicly. Even as the board began whispering and shifting the balance away from me. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. And in less than 24 hours, the evidence I had been quietly collecting was going to hit this same boardroom. Like a hurricane tearing the roof off a house. Daniel thought this was the day he ended me. But he didn't realize. This was the day he triggered his own downfall. I left the boardroom without a word. Feeling the sting of every glance, every whispered judgment, every subtle shake of a head. Daniel had played his hand, and the room had leaned in his favor. Or so it seemed. But I wasn't defeated. Not yet. Not when the weapons of truth were in my hands. Not when Tessa and I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, carefully constructing a plan so precise that even Daniel wouldn't see it coming. I returned to my office, laptop and USB in hand. Locked the door. Clicked through folders, verifying every piece of evidence. Emails, contracts, financial statements, surveillance footage. A digital arsenal ready to dismantle him and anyone aligned with his schemes. The first step was obvious, the board. They had been swayed by his charm, his casual authority, his rehearsed calm. But numbers, documents, undeniable proof? Numbers didn't lie. Documents didn't bend. Proof didn't care about charisma. Step 1. Expose the fraudulent transactions Daniel had orchestrated. Step 2. Reveal the shell corporations, tied to Trimar Holdings, to the board and regulators. Step 3. Leverage my inheritance as untouchable collateral, protecting myself from retaliation. Step 4. Make sure the right people, Tessa, my lawyer, and a few trusted executives were fully briefed and ready to act. By the time Daniel realized the trap, it would be too late. And he wouldn't see me coming because I wasn't planning like a frightened wife. I was planning like a chess master. I drafted the first email carefully. Subject line. Urgent. Full review of asset reassignment and financial irregularities. Recipients. The entire board, our lawyers, and regulatory contacts we had pre-identified. The attachment. A clean, time-stamped, and verifiable PDF dossier outlining every single illegal maneuver Daniel had attempted, all tied back to him personally and Trimar Holdings. I hesitated for half a second. Then clicked send. It was out of my hands. The board had the proof. The regulators had the proof. Daniel's safety net was gone. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. What did you just do? I smiled to myself. Expose the truth, I replied calmly. You have no idea what you're doing. You'll regret this. Regret? I whispered, almost to myself. Regret is his word, not mine. I hung up. Heart still racing, adrenaline high, but in a controlled, lethal way. Every step had been calculated. Every consequence predicted. And Daniel, for all his arrogance, had never anticipated that I would strike first. Minutes later, emails started pinging back. Urgent questions. Shocked confessions. Requests for immediate meetings. I could practically feel the panic vibrating through the digital waves. Board members began piecing together the reality. All the accounts, the shell corporations, the off-the-books transactions, all traced back to Daniel. All undeniable. And soon, the first domino fell. A call from the lead attorney. He's scrambling. He's denying, deflecting, and trying to rewrite the contracts, but it's too late. The regulators are already reviewing. I leaned back in my chair, allowing a small, satisfied breath to escape. For the first time in months, I felt the surge of control returning. But Daniel wasn't done yet. He never was. And when I received the next notification, my pulse caught again. An email from him, marked urgent and confidential, subject line. If you think this ends here, you're wrong. I opened it. Inside. A single line. Meet me tonight. Your move, or your life changes forever. He thought he could intimidate me. He thought he could still control the board, the company, the narrative. He was about to learn that the real power wasn't in the fear he instilled, it was in the truth I now held. And as the sun dipped below the Florida skyline, casting long shadows over the office, I knew one thing with certainty. The game had officially begun. And I was no longer the piece. I was the player. That night, Florida's humid air felt heavier than usual. The kind of heat that sticks to your skin and makes every breath a little harder. I drove slowly along the bay, Tessa sitting silently beside me, her expression unreadable in the shadows cast by the dashboard lights. The message Daniel sent earlier still burned in my mind. Meet me tonight. Your move, or your life changes forever. I had debated every possible scenario on the drive. I could ignore it. Go to the authorities, expose him publicly. But something in me, a mix of fear, fury, and disbelief, pushed me forward. I had to face him. I arrived at the same pier where everything had started weeks ago. The moon reflected off the dark water like shards of silver, and the gentle rocking of small boats was the only sound besides my heartbeat. Daniel stood at the end of the dock, arms crossed, his expression calm, almost smug. Surprised you showed up, he said casually. As if I'd ever been predictable. He didn't respond. I walked closer, letting the wooden planks groan under my weight. The smell of salt water mixed with his cologne. The scent of betrayal. Why? I asked. Why go this far? Why destroy everything we built? Daniel's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Then he chuckled, low and dangerous. Destroy? I was saving myself. You were too naive, too trusting, too soft. I'm not cruel, I'm practical. You call ruining me practical? You call betrayal practical? He stepped closer, lowering his voice, dangerous but controlled. You think I didn't see it coming? You always thought you were clever, didn't you? But the truth is, you don't know the first thing about me, or this world. I froze for a moment, then the rage hit. You were planning this the whole time. The contracts, the shell corporations, the hotel setup, the Trimar connection. He tilted his head, as if impressed by my discovery. Yes, all of it. And I'd do it again. Because in the end, you're replaceable. Replaceable? You're the man I married. The man I trusted. And you dared call me replaceable. The anger built in my chest until it was almost unbearable. I took a step closer, my voice shaking but steady. I trusted you. I loved you. And you treated me like a pawn in some twisted game. He shrugged. Life is a game. Some win, some lose. That's where you're wrong. I spat. Because this isn't a game anymore. You've underestimated me. And underestimating me was your first mistake. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You think you have the upper hand? You're still just reacting. You're emotional. You don't know what's coming. I know enough, I said. And I've already started. I reached into my bag and held up my laptop. Everything. Every fraud. Every illegal move. Every lie. The board, the regulators. Everyone will see. You thought you were untouchable. His lips pressed into a thin line. A flash of fear passed over his eyes, fast, fleeting, but there. For the first time in months, I realized the man who had tried to control my life was suddenly vulnerable. Daniel's voice dropped, quiet but dangerous. You'll regret this. I've built contingencies. I've planned for everything. I shook my head. Not everything. And then, he smiled. Slowly. A chilling, calculated smile that made my stomach drop. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. And I knew, deep down, that this confrontation was only the beginning of a storm I had barely started to unleash. The next morning, I woke to a city that felt heavier, darker. Daniel hadn't responded to my texts or calls, but the emails I sent to the board had triggered waves I hadn't fully anticipated. Some of the board members were hesitant, nervous about the scandal and the regulators. Others were downright defensive, siding with Daniel despite the evidence. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that even truth wasn't enough sometimes. People fear exposure. People fear losing money, influence, reputation. And fear is a dangerous weapon, almost as sharp as betrayal. Tessa and I met in the small conference room I had commandeered. She leaned over my laptop, scrolling through the board's replies. Some of them are pushing back, she said quietly. They're threatening to slow down any action, ask for more evidence. They're giving Daniel time. I felt my chest tighten. Time was the one thing I couldn't afford. Then we accelerate, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We can't wait for them to decide when justice happens. We make it happen. Tessa nodded, but her expression betrayed worry. It's not just the board, she said. He's tying up other connections. Offshore accounts, private allies. If he gets one more advantage, we could lose the leverage we've worked for. He swallowed hard. For the first time, the enormity of what we were facing hit me. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal itself. Daniel laughing at my naivety, plotting my ruin. Even as we shared a life, a home, a history. Every memory felt tainted now, poisoned by the knowledge of his manipulation. And yet, anger burned beneath the surface. Not the fleeting, impulsive anger of the past months, but a cold, focused rage that sharpened every thought, made every strategy clearer, every move deliberate. This wasn't about revenge for pride. This was survival. And I would not fail. By late afternoon, a new email arrived. No subject, no sender. Just an attachment. I opened it. Inside, financial statements showing additional transfers Daniel had made overnight. Thousands of dollars shifted into accounts we hadn't traced. Some tied to offshore entities. Some linked to anonymous shell corporations. He was moving faster than we expected. He was anticipating our next move, maybe even watching us now. I looked at Tessa. Her jaw was tight, hands clenched into fists. He's adapting. He's calculating. We need a new plan. I nodded slowly. Yes. We needed a new plan. One that would hit him where he thought he was untouchable. One that would leave him exposed, defenseless, and humiliated. We spent the evening combing through every email, every contract, every transaction. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by murmured calculations and the occasional frustrated exclamation. Then we found it. A single, overlooked loophole in one of Daniel's contracts. Something that could unravel months of careful planning in minutes. My heart raced. I leaned over the laptop, reading the clause again and again. It was perfect. Precise. And it gave us the opening we needed. Tessa placed a hand on my shoulder. This is it, she said softly. One move. One mistake, and it's over. I exhaled slowly, determination hardening inside me. We had one shot. One perfect shot. And I knew Daniel wouldn't see it coming. That night, I received another text. No words this time, just a location pin. The message. You think you're winning. Come see me. Midnight. My place. My stomach twisted. This was no longer just about money, proof, or reputation. This was personal. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, I realized Daniel had set a trap of his own. Midnight came faster than I expected. Tessa drove silently, the Florida streets empty and glistening from a light drizzle. Every shadow felt like a trap. Every reflection in a passing window a potential threat. I gripped the edge of the seat, my mind replaying the text Daniel had sent. You think you're winning. Come see me. Midnight. My place. My pulse was rapid, but my thoughts were razor sharp. This wasn't a surrender. It wasn't fear. It was a calculated confrontation. If he thought he could bait me into recklessness, he had miscalculated. Daniel's mansion loomed like a fortress in the darkness. Every light flickered in a way that felt both inviting and sinister. I parked a few blocks away, observing quietly, as Tessa whispered. No sudden moves. He wants a reaction. I nodded. I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. We approached the front door, and I noticed something I hadn't before. A faint reflection in one of the large glass panels. Someone else was watching. I froze. Tessa's hand gripped mine. Go slow. Trust me. Inside, Daniel waited, as expected. But he wasn't alone. On the leather couch, in the center of the room, sat a man I didn't recognize at first. Tall, imposing, impeccably dressed, with a calm that sent chills down my spine. Daniel smirked. I'd like you to meet Mr. Collins. He's been overseeing some sensitive operations. And he's very interested in your little inheritance, and what you think you control. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't just about the company. It was bigger. Far bigger. You see, Daniel continued, leaning back casually, your sister may have been clever, but she's not in my league. And you? You've been playing checkers while I've been playing chess. I steadied myself. So this is it, I said slowly. Your final play? Collins didn't speak, just watched, almost amused, while Daniel continued. You're trapped. Every move you've made has been anticipated. By the time you realize it, it'll be too late. I held my tongue for a moment, letting their arrogance hang in the air. Then I reached into my bag, pulling out the USB Tessa had prepared. You're right, I said softly. But not everything has gone your way. Not yet. I pressed a button, connecting the USB to Daniel's sleek office system. Files, recordings, and spreadsheets began to upload automatically. Daniel's face shifted. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Fear. And that's when the biggest secret revealed itself. On the screen. Emails and contracts showing Daniel had been secretly diverting funds not only from our company but from Collins's own accounts. Every single offshore transfer. Every illegal maneuver he had tried to hide. The room went silent. Tessa whispered from behind me. He underestimated you. Always. Daniel's smirk faltered. This can't be. He stammered. Collins leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Explain this. Now. For the first time, Daniel realized the game had shifted. He had just triggered a revelation that put him in direct conflict with his own ally. I stepped forward, voice steady and unflinching. You thought you could erase me. You thought I was predictable. You thought you controlled everything. Daniel opened his mouth, but I cut him off. You controlled nothing. And now, thanks to your own mistakes, everything you tried to protect is collapsing around you. I watched as Collins processed the documents. The shifting expressions, shock, betrayal, anger, were intoxicating. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of power and clarity. This was no longer about survival. This was about justice. Daniel had played his hand. And I had countered. But one final confrontation remained. One final moment where everything could tip. Because in less than an hour, the board, the regulators, and every investor would see the full scope of his deception. And Daniel had no idea what was coming next. The sun hadn't even risen when we made the first call. Tessa and I coordinated with regulators, key board members, and legal contacts we had quietly prepped for months. Every email, every dossier, every recording was now ready to hit the right inboxes simultaneously. Daniel thought he could intimidate me. He thought he could isolate me, smear my reputation, and erase my influence. But by the time he realized the storm was coming, it would be far too late. I watched the first confirmation emails come through. Acknowledgements from regulators. Alerts from the board. Requests for immediate meetings. The web he'd spun so meticulously was beginning to unravel before his very eyes. By mid-morning, the board convened. Daniel arrived, confident, smug, prepared to assert control. And then the first report landed on the conference table. Every illicit transaction, every offshore account, every shell corporation documented, time-stamped, undeniable. The room went silent. Board members glanced at Daniel, then at me. Then at the regulators on the video call, who confirmed that investigations were underway and could escalate to federal charges. Daniel's face shifted, smugness faltered. Confidence crumbled. Panic flashed in his eyes. This is impossible, he stammered. One of the regulators leaned in, voice crisp. It's very possible, Mr. Daniel. We now have everything we need to proceed. Your cooperation is optional. I sat back in my chair, feeling the tension drain away. The weight of months of betrayal and plotting was lifting, replaced by something sharper, cleaner, purer, justice. Daniel tried to argue, tried to deny, tried to spin the narrative, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every lie had been recorded. Every illegal move had been traced. Board members shook their heads. Legal teams drew up immediate actions. Regulators confirmed that investigations could move forward with full force. And Daniel? He sat there, defeated, humiliated, as the empire he thought he controlled crumbled around him. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. He had underestimated me. He had misjudged my strength. And now, he was paying the price. Later, Tessa and I met in my office, the city skyline glowing behind us. She handed me a glass of water. We didn't speak at first. Finally, she said, "You did it. You didn't just survive, you won." I nodded slowly. I never imagined it would feel like this, I admitted. Not the anger, the fear, the power. All wrapped into one moment. She smiled, just faintly. "It's not over. But you've leveled the playing field. Daniel won't know what hit him next." I stared out the window, thinking about everything: the betrayal, the manipulation, the lies, the danger. And I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my company, and my sense of self. But just as I thought the storm was over, my phone buzzed. A single message. No sender. Just 3 words. "We know everything." I froze. Because Daniel wasn't the only threat anymore. The morning after the board meeting, Florida felt quieter somehow. Not empty or lifeless, but expectant, like the air itself was holding its breath. I sat at my desk, looking out at the water, the sun glinting off the waves as if mocking the chaos that had just passed. For the first time in months, I could think without my chest tightening. I had been through fear, betrayal, and anger, but I had emerged intact. Stronger. Smarter. Sharper. I sipped my coffee, still warm, and let myself remember the nights spent planning, waiting, anticipating every move Daniel might make. I remembered the fear when Tessa and I had dodged him at the marina, the thrill of executing our plan flawlessly, the satisfaction of seeing him falter in front of the board. I realized something crucial. Power doesn't come from titles, money, or control. Power comes from knowledge. From strategy. From knowing yourself well enough to act when it matters most. Daniel had forgotten that. He had relied on arrogance, manipulation, and fear. I had relied on preparation, clarity, and courage. And in the end, courage won. I sent a brief email to the board, confirming my role in assisting the investigation, and clarifying that my actions were intended to protect the company and its stakeholders. No dramatics. No ego. Just facts. The board responded with support, many expressing relief that someone competent had been steering the ship in a storm. Tessa leaned against my desk, arms crossed, smirking faintly. "Feels good, doesn't it?" she asked. I nodded. More than I expected. More than I thought I deserved. She raised an eyebrow. "Deserved? You worked for this. You fought for it. Deserve has nothing to do with it. I smiled, letting the weight of her words sink in. For the first time, I felt truly free. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And the betrayal that had once left me broken now fueled my strength. But beneath that sense of triumph, a flicker of caution remained. Daniel may have fallen, but the world was full of people like him. And I had learned that to survive, to protect what was mine, I had to stay vigilant. I stood by the window, looking at the city below, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The lies, the manipulation, the close calls, the anger, the heartbreak, the determination. I had been tested. I had been betrayed. I had been underestimated. And I had won. The horizon glowed orange and pink. A new day. A new chapter. And I was ready. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the final lesson was still ahead. The Florida sunrise painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. It wasn't just a new day, it felt like a rebirth. I stood on my balcony, coffee in hand, letting the breeze carry away the tension that had gripped me for months. The city beneath me buzzed with life, oblivious to the storm that had just passed. But I didn't need it to know. I had survived, I had fought, and I had reclaimed what was mine. Daniel was no longer a threat. The board had acted, regulators had confirmed investigations, and the truth had dismantled every corner of his lies. He had underestimated me, as so many had. But I had learned, strength isn't just about muscle or wealth, it's about strategy, patience, and knowing when to strike. Betrayal can break you or it can teach you. Humiliation can crush you or it can sharpen you. And injustice, while terrifying, can become the catalyst for reclaiming your power. I chose the latter. I had fought not only to save my company, but to protect my dignity, my integrity, and my future. I had turned fear into strategy, anger into precision, and betrayal into an opportunity to rise stronger than before. Sometimes life puts you in impossible situations. Sometimes the people you trust the most will hurt you. But no one, not even the most cunning, the most powerful, the most ruthless, can take your inner strength unless you let them. I turned from the balcony, the glow of the sunrise following me back into my office. The company was secure, the board aligned, and my plans for growth and innovation were already underway. And while the scars of this ordeal would remain, they were reminders of how far I had come. I was no longer the victim in someone else's story. I was the author of my own. And from now on, I would write it with courage, strategy, and unshakable resolve. Have you ever faced betrayal that made you question everything? How did you find your strength? Share your story in the comments, your voice matters. And if you want more real-life stories of resilience, strategy, and triumph over betrayal, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the most powerful victories come not from luck, but from the courage to fight back.